This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu Al-Samid.
So welcome to episode 67 of Wheelbearings. We'll talk about what we're driving in a moment, but Sam, you're actually going to go out to the West Coast, so you're very brave, because everybody knows that the East Coast is best. I say that as I sit here in Massachusetts, so suck it. But anyway, you're going out to be on This Week in Tech again.
I'm going out to do a whole bunch of stuff next week. I will be on This Week in Tech on Sunday, which is May 13th.
That's Mother's Day for those of you following along at home.
Yeah, for the live show. And then I'll also be doing Leo Laporte and I will be doing a segment with the Cadillac CT6, demoing Super Cruise and taking a look at Super Cruise.
Has he tried Super Cruise before?
He has not tried Super Cruise as far as I know.
Okay, that should be interesting because he's so into tech and so many other realms. It'd be interesting to see his take on it.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how he responds to it because he owns a Tesla Model X, and he's got autopilot and he's sometimes uses autopilot, although his wife absolutely refuses to use it anymore because it has tried so many times to pull her into the center median of the highway. So she just doesn't even bother anymore.
Near-death experiences will do that.
Yeah, occasionally. I'll be on Twit with Leo and Florence Ion and Harry McCracken on Sunday, and then I've got some meetings on Monday and Tuesday at a few different companies in the Bay Area, and then Wednesday and Thursday I'll be at the Connected and Autonomous Vehicles Conference in Santa Clara, and I'll be chairing the sessions on Thursday. So if you're around in the Bay Area this week, and you've got something interesting to show me that you're doing in the autonomous or connected vehicle space, ping me and we can set up a meeting.
And I will be doing nothing interesting, and nobody can come and ping me. I mean, you can ping me, but you can't find me.
Yeah, you'll just ignore it anyway.
I'll probably respond, but I'm an international man of mystery. I need to maintain the veil of secrecy. Yeah,
I'm sure that's not too hard.
No, not at all. All right, well, let's talk about the cars we're driving. Let's see. Man, let me pull up the spreadsheet. Stand by. So you were in.
You want me to just tell you what I had?
Well, I was trying to make it better, but just go ahead. Now I see what you had, and I want to hear about it. So go ahead.
So yeah, I had the latest product from Jaguar Land Rover, which is the Land Rover Range Rover Velar. Which I guess you could just call it the Range Rover Velar. You don't really need the Land Rover in there. But anyway, it's the new mid-sized model from Range Rover that slots in above the compact Evoque and below the classic Range Rovers. And it shares its platform with the Jaguar F-Pace. And so it's actually same wheelbase and roughly the same overall size as the F-Pace. But it's where the F-Pace is clearly very much a road-going SUV sort of thing. The Velar is, has all of the things that you would expect of a Land Rover product. It's designed for. I mean, it works great on road, but it's really designed for off-road running. If that's what you want to do. Although I suspect that the vast majority of people that buy this thing will never take it on anything worse than a gravel road.
Yeah, it might go on like a driveway with pea gravel on it. Out by where the horses are kept.
Yeah, that sort of thing. So it will do just fine there. It'll also do. I'm sure it'll do great in winter weather. When you get into some deep snow and stuff, it's got plenty of ground clearance, unlike an Alfa Romeo Giulia. It's actually as SUVs go, I think it's really good looking. I really like the way it looked, especially the one I had.
It's hard at this point for Range Rover to make a bad looking vehicle. Their design language is just so so refined. You know, it's very clean. It doesn't need a lot of ornamentation. You know, the Evoque was one of those that, like, it looked really good, but it was kind of dreadful from the inside. The seating position was weird and stuff. At least I thought it was. But the Velar is it's really pretty. And does it replace the Range Rover Sport?
No, so you still have the Range Rover Sport, which is a little bit bigger, certainly taller, taller profile. The Sport is kind of the cut down short wheelbase version of the classic Range Rover. So you got the big classic Range Rover, the Range Rover Sport, which is kind of a short wheelbase, higher performance version of that. And then the Evoque is at the entry level as the compact, and in the middle you have the Velar, which is clearly lower profile. It doesn't have the tall roof look of the classic Range Rovers. It's sleeker, and it's good. The proportions are very similar to the F-Pace, which is good. Nothing wrong with that.
No, that's right.
But it's an even it's a cleaner, sleeker design. So you got the combination of those proportions of the F-Pace, the sportier proportions, with the Range Rover design language, very smooth, slick. The one I drove was this really dark red color, and then everything else was blacked out, and it looks really sharp in that combination.
That sounds really, really good looking. So what did it have for a powertrain? Because it has the Ingenium engines, right? The 4-cylinder and the 6s?
So you have the V6, the supercharged V6 is the one option, and then you can also get the 2-liter turbo diesel. But the one I had the 2-liter gas direct injected turbo 4-cylinder with 247 horsepower.
I'm trying to remember if I've had a Jaguar vehicle with that engine in it. Maybe I have. I can't. Anyway, how is it?
It's a good engine. I mean, it's strong. It feels like it's got 250 horsepower, and it's more than adequate for this one. It's certainly not as strong. The when I drove an F-Pace, I had the F-Pace R. Which has the 3-liter supercharged V6, which has 380 horsepower. It certainly didn't feel as strong as that, but it had plenty of performance, so I had no complaints there. The interior of the Velar just looks gorgeous. I mean, it's a beautiful design. The seats are comfy. There's plenty of room, even in the back seat. The only complaint really I had about the cabin of the Velar was the infotainment system. So it's got a 2-screen setup, 2 touch screens. So it's a very clean design. It's got the pop-up rotary shift knob, just like all the other JLR vehicles have these days. And you've got rotary controls for the volume, the audio volume, and for the climate controls. But then you've got these 2 touch screens to give you access to all the other various controls. The upper one that's in the dash, actually, when the car's off, it drops back in and it lays flush with the surrounding instrument panel. But then when you start the engine, it tilts up a little bit. But the problem I found is when you're wearing polarized sunglasses, the displays that they're using on that upper screen at any angle anywhere in the range, you can actually go into the settings and you can adjust the angle you want that upper screen to come up to, so you can have it lay back flatter or sit up more vertically. At any of those angles, I was getting distortion looking at that upper screen, which is where it displays the navigation info. So the bottom screen, that's a little bit lower down in the center stack, is where you get various controls. So you can dive into the controls, to turn on things like the massaging seats and the terrain management system. If you want to, set it to change the traction control for driving in deep sand or snow or mud, and all kinds of different stuff. And so that's where all of that stuff is buried, is in that lower screen. But the upper screen is where you see the navigation and the audio controls. And I was getting a distorted view no matter what angle I set it at. So that's not good. But other than that, it all looks really pretty. I mean, it's really nicely executed, and as long as you're not wearing polarized sunglasses, it's fine. Aside from being touchscreens in a car, which are inherently a bad thing, no matter who does them or what kind of displays you use. But that's a whole nother issue. One thing that, from a functional standpoint, probably the one complaint I had was with the driver assist stuff. Yeah, and this is something I always try out in every vehicle I have to see how it behaves. The adaptive cruise control was fine, but the lane keeping system was really rough. If you started to drift towards the edge of the lane, there would be a very distinct rumbling in the steering wheel, but then it would also kind of try to jerk the car, back towards the center. It wasn't very well calibrated, and it never really tried to hold the center of the lane. So, it was really more annoying than helpful. But aside from that, it was a really nice vehicle to drive.
Yeah. I mean, I remember gawking at the interior of one, down in sort of at an event, where there was one hanging out in the garage, and, it looks pretty cushy in there, like it should. What's it cost-wise? What's it going for?
The one I had was the mid-range SE model. So there's, it was the SE R Dynamic model, with the 2-liter gas engine. And it came out to about $75,000.
I mean, that's a lot of money, but it's not.
Well, yes, it's a lot of money, but as Range Rovers go, it's actually pretty reasonable. I mean, it's a lot less than a classic. Classic Range Rover, can easily run you well over $100,000.
Right, but it's also like smaller, and it's on a different platform, and so you are trading something away.
Oh, absolutely. And, compared to the F-Pace, the suspension tuning, is a little bit softer. You can feel that, the suspension's been set up, to provide more wheel articulation capability. So if you're going to go off-roading, if you want a British SUV, with some performance that's in this size class, if you're only ever going to drive it on the road and you want something that feels more with better driving dynamics on the road, go for the Jaguar. If you want something that's going to be able to actually handle going off road and going over logs and whatever else you might find on an off road course, then go with the Velar. And you can definitely feel the difference in the driving dynamics between the two. The Jag is definitely set up more stiffly. This one, you can feel there's more cushiness in the ride quality. There's a little bit more compliance. When you turn into a corner, it doesn't feel as stiff. It's not. It's not that it feels mushy or anything, but it definitely feels more compliant. Like it's been designed to absorb, the basically Michigan roads for one thing.
Right.
So it does well from that respect.
Well, I mean, it's hard to sort of complain. It's one of those things, like, even as an auto writer where you get kind of jaded to these things, it's hard to complain about a week in a Range Rover. Generally, they're usually pretty nice. So
yeah, I mean, they're nice. They're a nice place to spend time. I mean, they're not. I wouldn't say they're my cup of tea. Generally, they're not something that I necessarily want to spend time with. But overall, they're really nice vehicles.
Yeah, they know their target market quite well.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's I guess the sort of last question I have about it is, like, who is it for? And it's for the folks that are considering the F-Pace or something by Mercedes or BMW. It competes with all those upper echelon brands.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's for somebody that might have considered, something like, an Audi Q5, or Mercedes GLE, or a BMW X5, but, perhaps once, I think compared to any of those, it's hard to imagine saying this about a Range Rover, but it's got a much a sleeker, more modern appearance than any of those, I think.
Yeah.
And at the same time, also sportier. But I think it's I would, although I didn't take it off road, I would guess that it's a lot more off road capable than any of those. And I think, if you wanted something, in that size and performance class, that gives you a true luxury feeling compared to any of the Germans, I think it definitely, it gives you that, while providing real off-road capability. I think really, perhaps the most, maybe the best, alternative to this might actually be a Jeep Grand Cherokee, a high-end Jeep Grand Cherokee. Because the Jeep is also going to, it's probably going to match the off-road capability of this thing. It's probably not going to feel quite as premium as this thing, but it's probably the best alternative to it.
Yeah. I'm certain that one of the sales, one of the selling points of it is that it's not a BMW or a Mercedes or even a Grand Cherokee. It's a Range Rover, and they have really brilliantly. Now that you mentioned how surprising it seems to be saying the styling is sleeker and modern and all those very nice things you just said about it. It is a little crazy to think about that, because for decades, Range Rovers were these boxy things. The first two generations of them looked like they were chopped with an axe out of just a block of wood or something. And now they really have turned into this lifestyle high prestige brand that is sleek. They've reinvented themselves, and Jaguar has to a degree as well. They've really changed it up. They don't have any retro really in the Range Rover lineup anyway. There's not anything retro that I can sort of put my finger on. So that right there is kind of a masterstroke, and it happened kind of quietly. It sort of snuck up on us.
Yeah, this is kind of it really started during the latter part of the Ford era, in the late 2000s, probably around 2007 or 8, I think, kind of the last generation of Range Rovers and Jaguars that were launched when they were still owned by Ford. And then, since being acquired by Tata, they've really carried that forward and really extended that theme, for both brands, so each brand has its own distinct look, and clearly, they're doing a lot of hardware sharing under the skin, particularly for this one. I think this is really the only one where they actually share a platform between the two brands. The other Range Rovers are, distinctly Range Rovers. There's nothing from a platform perspective that's shared with Jaguar, and the rest of the Jaguar cars don't really share anything with the Land Rover or Range Rover models.
I thought that's true. But the
engine powertrains are shared.
There's that, but the F-Pace and the XE and the F-Type are all share a bunch of stuff. They do share a lot of stuff, like suspension and this is design and stuff, not necessarily.
Yeah, so this is the only one from the Land Rover side of the house that really shares much with any of those. The Evoque is a front wheel drive model, so I guess the Evoque probably shares some platform with the new the E-Pace, the smaller crossover from Jaguar.
Right. Now I'm going to have to go to the Wikipedia and.
But still, each one has its own distinct look and style. And you look at anything from the Range Rover lineup, and you can instantly know, that's a Range Rover. So even though this is a much lower profile, sleeker vehicle than the classic Range Rover, it's still, there's still enough commonality. There's enough design DNA there to tell you that, this is part of the same family.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that, this was the first Range Rover that I can recall that has retracting door handles. So when the car's locked, the door handles sit flush.
I remember that from when I looked over one. So are we going to see that as a more common feature, you think?
Probably.
I'm not sure how to feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, it does contribute to that sleeker look. Not having the door handles sticking out. They sit flush. With the rest of the surrounding bodywork. But of course, that's one more thing to go wrong. During the time I had it, they worked fine. You walk up to the thing with the key in your pocket, and as you approach it, the door handles automatically pop out, so you can open the doors, and then when you walk away, they'll shut. But it again, it's a thing that, do we really need that? I think it probably contributes a little bit to aerodynamics. Certainly makes it a cleaner look. I had less issues with the door handles on this car than I did, the couple of times I drove Tesla Model S's that have very similar door handles. These never failed to open up for me.
I mean,
whereas the Tesla did.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sensing a theme. I'm sure it makes a marginal improvement in aero as well. Like, okay, fine.
I think, neat. In this case, I think they did it more for the aesthetic than for the aerodynamics.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make a case for it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so I had a couple of things because it's been a little bit of time. So the first car I had, or I can talk about, was the Genesis G80. I don't have a ton to say about it. We've talked about it before. Other than that is a hell of a car. It's a big luxury sedan that drives really well, even when you shut the traction and stability control stuff off. It's got a naturally good handling riding chassis, which the first generation of Genesis kind of was a little bit more hairy. And so they did a lot of work, just chassis development work on the G80, and it paid off. It's a great driving car. If you're considering like what the first couple of generations of Lexus LS were, I really feel like that's what the Genesis is at this point. It's really, really well done. And I thought it was going to be like a $60,000 car, and it was like 45, which is so impressive to me. I'm sure they're losing money.
I wouldn't be so sure of that.
Okay. I mean, I'm impressed if they're not losing money to establish the brand by selling this car for $45,000. Because, inside and out, the styling, first of all, the Genesis styling is done by, guys who styled the usual luxury suspects for a couple of decades. So it's not like they suck at it. They're really good at styling great looking cars, and like all of Hyundai and Kia's stuff looks fantastic. The design, regardless of price, it's great design, and this car is no exception. And inside and out, the materials are really, really, really good inside. Everything you touch feels expensive. Even the switchgear and stuff has like this. It's like I want to say it's flocked. I don't know what the proper industry term is, but there's like a coating on all of the switchgear, so it feels really luxurious to the touch. It may actually be flocking. I forget what they call it, but it's like a little extra layer of softness on it. Mm-hmm. Everything operates really nicely. The materials, again, they just it's good stuff, and it's put together really well. It's designed really well, so it's kind of hard to not be impressed with that, especially for the $45,000. So, I really, if the badge is not your first concern, I don't understand why everybody who's looking for this kind of large luxury sedan it isn't shopping for Genesis cars only.
Well, that's you just answered your question.
I know.
There. I mean, more often than not, people that are in this segment are shopping the badge as much as anything else.
Yeah.
It's the badge, the brand brings with it a certain degree of status, regardless of how good the car, or the vehicle, today might actually be. There's a lot of inertia that goes with certain brands, and, building up that degree of inertia for, essentially an unknown brand, which is what Genesis is at this point, even though, it's been, a decade since the original Genesis debuted, it's still, that brand is still a relative unknown. And if anything, most people, if they know Genesis at all, they probably still associate it with Hyundai.
Yep.
Which is not what you associate it with a luxury brand. So it's hard. I mean, look at how long Cadillac has been trying to rebuild their brand, for nearly 20 years now. And they're still struggling to be taken seriously, at the same level with, BMW and Mercedes-Benz and even Lexus. So, for, an upstart like Hyundai, to, first to bring the original Genesis sedan and coupe and then to break off Genesis as its own separate brand, is really challenging.
Yeah. Well, and they did. I think it was a misstep, but it was kind of maybe that's on the outside looking in. I think it was a misstep for them to launch Hyundai Genesis and then try to establish Genesis on its own. But I think the reasons for that were they just didn't have the money, and they wanted to get a toehold, and they knew that launching a brand straight up like that was going to cost $1 billion, and to do it with that first car, such an untested thing, was much more of a gamble, where if they kept it Hyundai Genesis, they had a better way to shut it down maybe without losing so much. So there is that work that they're going to have to do. And it's just like, that's just patience to wait it out so that Genesis does become a thing. There's they've got to consistently build better cars for less money to get over that hump. If it's competing with an S-Class, it has to be better than an S-Class, at least in some respects, and certainly for value. And it's got to do that for 10 years before Genesis is just going to, be as going to roll off the tongue, I guess. But it's just tough. I mean, how long has Ram been Ram instead of Dodge Ram?
Yeah. And people still, they look at a Ram truck today and, they still think of it as a Dodge.
Yeah.
Even though the new Rams, they no longer have the crosshair grille, that everybody still thinks, when they see a Ram truck, they still think of Dodge Ram. At least they recognize the Ram brand. They just don't think of it as a standalone brand as part of the Fiat Chrysler family now. They still think of it as part of Dodge. Which is something that's probably going to take, another generation to get over that, by which time, it may well have been reabsorbed back into it, or perhaps maybe Dodge will just cease to exist by then. Yeah,
they'll sell off the truck brand, because that's one of the money factories over there. I mean, who is confused by it is my 10-year-old, because he'll see the cars. He'll see like an Avenger with the Ram's head on it, and then he'll be like, wait, that's a Ram, but there's a car. It's like, yeah. Dodge used a Ram as their symbol for decades. So he's new enough at it that he doesn't have that decades of sort of programming. Dodge Ram goes together. So I mean, there's not a whole lot. I guess in a good way. There's not a whole lot of.
Why would you subject your young child to even seeing an Avenger?
Sometimes you just.
Do you hate your kids?
Occasionally. No, so we were out in the lovely metropolis of Springfield, Massachusetts, last weekend, and Springfield has a wide variety of vehicles, and Avengers were around, and so he saw some Avengers. We didn't have much else to do, so we were like gawking at cars. And
so instead of taking him to see an Avengers movie, you took him to see some Avengers.
Yeah, we had the dog with us. I'm sure this is fascinating, but like I was not about to leave the dog like in the car for a whole movie.
Okay.
He probably would have been fine, but yeah. So we went and found a park. If you're in Springfield, Forest Park is lovely, although it got really crowded in the afternoon. I didn't realize that. So anyway, the last thing I have to say about the Genesis is that the V6, like there's no need to pop for the V8 if they still even make the V8 or the turbo or whatever. Just get the regular.
I think they still offer that. You can still get the 5-liter V8.
I love that engine. It's great, but you don't buy it. Don't buy it.
Did you have the normally aspirated V6 or the twin turbo?
I had the naturally aspirated V6, and it's plenty. It moves this thing around with lots of authority. It sounds great. It's smooth and unobtrusive otherwise. Like that is a great engine.
No, I agree.
There's no need for any more. And certainly I'm sure the 3-liter twin turbo would be nice. I would like to try that.
Well, yeah, the Sport, the G80 Sport with the twin turbo V6 is great, and I would actually take that over the 5-liter V8 any day.
Yeah, but that V8 sounds so good. They did such a good job on that V8.
That's true, but
it's right. The V6 with the turbos is probably more flexible and stronger overall, and just generally better to drive, but it doesn't have the rhythm. The rhythm. It's about the rhythm.
That's true. But it's got torque. Lots of torque.
That's true. Speaking of something with impressive torque, the other thing I'm driving, which I still have, is the Chrysler Pacifica Hybrid. And so we were talking about it a little bit last night, and I think it's a worthwhile discussion. It's a hybrid minivan. So they win because nobody else has one. And I think it's like a market that's ripe for a hybrid, and it's a plug-in hybrid. So it'll go for, I think I got like 26 miles out of the battery before it kicked into just straight up hybrid mode, which I thought was pretty good for a vehicle that large and running on the highway. But it's a good foray into hybrids, and the fact that they designed stow and go into the platform means that they can put the batteries in there. So the only thing you lose is stow and go. So that's really smart.
For the second row stow and go.
Right.
You still have the third row. So if you don't need the third row, you can flip those back into that cavity in the back of the van, and then you have a huge cargo area behind the second row.
Which is like and that's how it came to me. And I flipped the seats up tonight to use the third row, and I was impressed at how easy it is to deploy those seats. You pull on one strap, the seat pops up. You pull on the other, the seat back pops up, and you fold up the headrest, and you're done. That the Pacifica it's just a great family vehicle, and a hybrid version of it, I think. For the way I'm using it, I'm not using it quite right because I'm commuting too far with it. I'm doing 90 miles round trip, which is just too much to really get the full benefit of the plug-in part of it. It still gets better fuel economy than a regular Pacifica would, but it's not the best hybrid. It's better as a battery electric.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the Pacifica Hybrid. They call it a hybrid, but they kind of hide the fact that it's actually a plug-in hybrid. And it's got if you're driving it around town, you can easily get over 30 miles of electric driving range. And given the way most people actually drive, driving 2/3 of people drive less than 35 miles a day. If you do nothing more than just plug it in at night and unplug it in the morning, and then you don't even think about it, you just drive it, you can do almost all your driving without ever using any gas, which is amazing for a vehicle like that, because minivans, typically are not that fuel efficient.
No.
And this thing is pretty amazing.
Right. Minivans are not that mini, but I would be pleased to get low 20s out of a regular, just plain minivan. Low 20s would be good. Because they're big and they're heavy and they all have pretty powerful V6 engines and all kinds of stuff in them. So I'm getting, I think right now the average is about 31.5 miles per gallon overall. So that's not bad. I did most of my morning commute, or 2/3 of my morning commute on batteries. I could have found a place to plug it into 110 at work, and I would have been able to do 2/3 of my commute home on battery. Maybe less, because I don't think on 110 it would charge as fully. It does take quite a while to charge off 110, but you can also plug it into 220. So
yeah, and the other thing about this vehicle is for people that have minivans, if you've got a couple of kids and you're hauling them around in a minivan, one of the things a lot of families, will do is, like, the summertime, you take a road trip for a vacation, go visit the grandparents or whatever. And if you've got an EV, for those, just a straight up battery electric vehicle for those trips, now you've got to start thinking about planning ahead, planning your route, to make sure that you have places to stop along the way to top off the battery, depending on how far you're going. And with this thing, you can drive it around electrically most of the time. And, when it's time for a road trip, or, to, take everybody to the beach in the summertime or whatever it might be, you just drive it like any other Pacifica. And, when the battery runs out, you just keep on going, and, you stop at a gas station, fill it up. And, so, for those times when you need longer range, it's there. But you don't even have to really think about it. Yeah,
and the thing is, I made this comment last night when we were chatting too. That the powertrain is not exactly subtle, but then I paid a little bit more attention to it today, and there are times where you can hear the whine of the motor and the whatever other electronics are doing their thing. But it is actually difficult to discern when the gas engine kicks on and off. They've done a really good job about smoothing that out. Which in hybrids has been, it's been rougher in some hybrids. Some are really good about it, and I think everybody's getting better. But I'm always a little bit concerned that it's going to feel like the sort of roughness of the most basic stop-start systems, where it's just like it gets tiresome. You get that just like thump, and then the engine starts up, and you really don't feel it. So they've done a very good job, and I don't know if it's Chrysler developing a system in-house, or if they've licensed parts of it. You probably know.
The system was developed entirely in-house. And one of the things they did when they were designing this is they designed the hybrid drive unit to actually fit within the same package envelope as the 9-speed ZF automatic that they use on all of their front-wheel drive vehicles or transverse engine vehicles. So, theoretically, they could add this to any of their transverse engine vehicles, including like the Compass, or the what else do they have? The Cherokee. And we'll probably actually see hybrid versions of those. So you could either do a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid version of any of those vehicles with this drive unit, just depending on what size battery you put in it. If you put a smaller battery, you could use it as just a regular hybrid, or a bigger battery, you could do a plug-in. And we'll, over the next couple of years, we'll probably start to see some of those come to market.
Yeah, and it's worth it. Those are good places to put hybrid stuff. I mean, I think about that. Like a hybrid Cherokee would probably be pretty popular. I hope.
Yeah, no, I think it would do all right. I mean, especially, if you look at, some of its competitors, Toyota's got both the RAV4 and the Highlander available with hybrid systems in there, and they're fairly popular. And we're gonna see hybrids coming to most SUVs over the next 4 or 5 years, from most of the manufacturers. Ford has already said they're going to offer either hybrids or plug-in hybrids in all of their SUVs, that are coming to market in the next couple of years. So including even like the Bronco. So, I think, it would behoove Chrysler to do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think that's coming regardless of what we think about it. So as a family van, I've now had time to sort of appreciate the Pacifica, and like it has key sense, which I like, but I also don't like because I only have the key sense fob. So I'm locked out of being able to turn the phone and the radio up as far as I might want sometimes. So it can be difficult to hear a phone call on the hands-free. But
is that like the
right? It's like my key
system?
Yeah.
There? Okay, so you can program each individual key for certain things. Like so, if you're going to let your teenage kid drive the vehicle, you can program it to geofence or to send you an alert. If they go outside of a particular area.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll do that, but what it definitely does is it limits top speed to, I think the default is to 85 miles an hour, and the radio and phone volume are limited, and it mutes the audio if the seatbelts are not buckled and you're driving. So it has some of those like safety aspects to it. So and it's a good idea. I'm just frustrated because I don't have control over it. I entered the wrong pin.
I'm surprised they programmed it that way and gave you that stuff.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised too.
Usually they don't have that stuff turned on by default in the press
cars.
But
if there's any group of drivers who may benefit from having the nannies on,
I didn't say that wasn't true. I just
so that's a little. It's a good thing that I just wish I could override because I'm a control freak. The adaptive cruise is really good. It's good in stop and go. It'll stop itself and then start again, which we talk about often. But they've done the work to make it worthwhile instead of like giving up in a line of traffic. I've got the limited, so it's nicely trimmed inside. It has the screen. It's really well thought out for like if you've got little people. It's designed to accommodate them and like keep them entertained. It has 2 screens on the back of the front seats, and they have games. Like my kids are playing, I think, checkers on it tonight.
Yeah, they've actually got games that are built in, so you don't have to download or stream anything or install anything. They're actually built right into the system, which is pretty cool.
Like they were so charmed by that, and like scoff at it, I guess, when you hear it. Like, why do I need a car with video games built in? But let me tell you. It's delightful. And it's I guess my biggest complaint, and this is sort of across Chrysler now, a few different Chrysler vehicles I've had the latest generation of Uconnect, and I don't like what they've done with it.
Why? I mean, what is it you don't like? Because I actually kind of like the interface they have on there.
The interface itself is okay, but what they've done is they've buried a bunch of important features, at least three presses in. Like if you have Uconnect in the latest version of Uconnect, try to find nav. It's you gotta press the button for
there's a nav button. Like there's a row of icons on the bottom of the home screen. It didn't have that across the bottom there.
Yeah,
really?
Maybe I'll look again, but it.
Do you have the?
Oh no! It has the row of icons, but nav isn't in there. No, you can drag it out and put it in there, but it's not. It's not in there.
Okay, so somebody else must have messed around with the settings because the default usually has the if the car has nav, it's usually got that as a default.
Okay.
In that row of that home row across the bottom.
So
of the
what was in there, and so that I guess that's another point though. Like what was in there seemed eminently useful. It had the seat heater controls and radio, but not media and something like there were things there that felt like yeah, okay, I want those to be there so I can just tap them and turn these things on. But I replaced one of them with media because radio doesn't get you. You can't switch if you're in the radio. You can't switch to USB or Bluetooth or whatever. That's like a separate category, which seems weird.
Isn't there a source button right on the steering wheel?
Maybe on the steering wheel there is. Right on the back, there's
I
got to remember which one there is. So okay,
I think it's on the back of the left hand spoke. If you tap middle, that button, it'll toggle through the
through sources
through all the different sources.
Okay. So that's easier than trying to find it in the screen, and I guess that again, like that's just my biggest gripe is that stuff that was normally there just got buried, and I'm assuming that it's the default to not have those icons down there because none of the Chrysler vehicles I've driven with this latest Uconnect system have had those icons down there. I would have had to like manually put them there. And while that's great that you can do that,
Either that or somebody else in your region has just been messing with you.
Well, that's true. I mean, all the cars do come with all of the, like, the most.
I mean, if they turned on all the nanny settings, then there's a good chance that somebody's messing with you.
It could be. I mean, it's always amusing to see what radio presets they come with. And, like, I think that they pick, like, the polar opposite of what they know that I consume in terms of media to program into the car and just leave it there. So anyway, so that, like, that's kind of a tiny gripe, but also it is, again, like an ongoing point. Like, the systems they're not as intuitive as they add features. Earlier Uconnect systems.
No, that is true in general. I think, when with the shift towards touchscreen systems, because we've got so many features in modern cars that part of the driving force for touchscreens is so you get rid of the overwhelming number of buttons and switches, right? Because if you did have physical controls for all this stuff, it would be just
right.
Would be
so
crazy.
Instead of an overwhelming number of buttons, though, we get an overwhelming number of pages and icons.
So maybe the solution is to just have less stuff in our cars.
But then you can't sell it for profit.
Yeah, I guess there is that.
Damn it. All right. Speaking of selling cars and stuff for profit, let's move on to our topics. I've complained enough about minivans. It's a good van. You should buy it. You know what? Like, let's just dive right in. So there's
so BMW Group has this relatively profitable brand that's part of the group.
I think BMW is all of their brands are relatively profitable. This one in particular.
Well, I suspect so. Rolls-Royce, for those who don't know, is actually owned by BMW. Has been since 2000, 1999 or 2000.
Yeah, something like that. It's been quite a while. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rolls-Royce has a new model that they introduced today. They did the global launch this morning in North American time, and it's an SUV. It's the first ever Rolls-Royce SUV, and it looks like a Rolls, and it's huge.
It's the name is the worst part because it's like it's the Cullinan or Cullinan or whatever, but like. Right away, I see the name and I think of like the water filtration people, and then like Mulligan, and it's just I don't know them and Bentley.
Yeah, it's actually named for something that's a little more close to home for Rolls-Royce, which is the largest ever gem quality rough cut diamond that was found in like 1905. It was a 3,100 carat diamond. And so they named the SUV after a big piece of carbon,
and
which I guess is appropriate for a vehicle that's probably going to emit as much CO2 as this thing, no doubt will.
Excellent. I'm glad that we did that tie in there, because if you didn't, I would have. But yeah, people are going to buy it, and
a few hundred people a year, or maybe 1,000 people a year.
If 1,000 people buy it, they're going to be really happy, because that's a lot of profit. That's a lot of sales, and I do think that there's demand for it. And I think it's good looking. And
hey, Bentley's selling the shocking number of Bentegas. The
Bentayga is awful. It's so ugly. It's so gauche. This is at least like it looks like a proper Rolls.
That's true. It does look like a very tall Rolls-Royce.
Yeah, and
it's still got the 6.75 liter twin turbo V12.
Adequate
with yeah. Well, it's no longer adequate. They actually tell you how much power it makes now. Which is 563, I think, or something like that.
That's adequate.
Yeah.
I just the only Rolls I've ever driven was a Phantom, and I was charmed, I guess. It's not necessarily the right word, but it was a really unique experience because it has that sort of power reserve dial and stuff, and so it makes you drive in a different way, I suppose. Where it's more like driving a boat. I guess, you know.
Well, the thing about the roll, especially the Phantoms, the Phantoms are not drivers' cars; they're cars to be driven in. Yeah, nobody that actually enjoys driving, would ever get a Phantom. Yeah, I guess if you want a Rolls that you prefer to actually take the wheel of yourself, you get a Ghost or a Wraith or something like that. If you have a Phantom, you have someone else that does the driving for you. You sit in the way out back, and enjoy that starscape in the headliner. Just kick back and relax. And when you arrive at your destination, if it's raining out, the driver comes around and opens the door and pulls the umbrella out that's hidden within the door, and holds it over your head as you walk into your meeting or your wherever it is you're going. It's the one time when I drove a Phantom, it has, this large diameter, skinny rimmed steering wheel. I forgot
about that.
Classic Rolls-Royce, and there's no real feeling of connection between it was like driving, a big American land yacht from the 1970s or something. It was,
except for
or 60s.
It felt very, very well assembled.
Oh, yes, there is that. Yes. These things are put together like a rock.
Yeah. You know what? Like when you start to look over any Rolls, and especially this one, I'm sure it's going to command a premium because it's a new model. But also when you start to look at it, and a Rolls-Royce purchase is an experience, in the US, they tend to spec them before they bring them in and have some stock of cars. But in other parts of the world, each one is a custom order. So it's not, the dealers aren't ordering them, the people are. And you can do that here. But.
It's like buying a Savile Row suit. You go in and you don't necessarily take your measurements, but you will see all the samples of the different hides and woods and everything else, and all the color options. And it's also like buying a BMW individual or a Porsche or something. If you already have a particular favorite suit and you want the car to match the color of your suit, or a tie or whatever it might be, they will happily paint it for you, whatever color you like, for
the money,
a suitable check, or wire transfer,
and that's yes. I don't think we as plebes can continue to throw rocks at that, but I mean, for some context, like they're expensive cars for people with money.
Rolls-Royce only builds about 2,000 or 3,000 cars a year. So, I mean, it's not, these are definitely not for everybody. I find it amusing that, that they felt that they had to do an SUV, I mean, that I think this is an indicator of kind of where the total, the overall vehicle market has gone. I mean, we talked before about, Ford discontinuing most of their passenger car nameplates in North America, and shifting over to SUVs and trucks. Well, I mean, even Rolls-Royce is doing it. I mean, they're still going to build the Phantom, but my guess is they're probably going to sell more of these Culinans than they do of Phantoms within the next couple of years.
I mean, I gotta think that the biggest markets for Rolls are not the U.S. I would say that the U.S. is maybe.
Actually, no, Rolls-Royce is still the biggest market, or the U.S. is still the biggest market.
Wow, I'm surprised. I would assume that the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia or something, would be actually 1 or 2, and then China would be, again, 1 or 2. So
I think China is second behind the U.S. I think the Middle East market, is for those that want SUVs. I think the Culinan will actually probably do really well in the Middle East, as a higher end alternative to the Bentayga and to Range Rovers, and Mercedes G-Class or G-Wagons,
and the Cayenne and like all of that stuff. That stuff is extremely popular there, and so and I think it'll do well in China too.
Oh yeah, the Chinese market's going to be huge. And places like Hong Kong and. and Macau, they'll be very popular there.
Yeah, and in typical Rolls-Royce fashion, that the press release has a lot of hyperbole. Was this the car that you most anticipated this year?
No, not at all.
I could give a crap whether it comes or goes. So I would say it's the most anticipated Rolls-Royce of 2018, but they are saying that it is the most anticipated car of 2018 and quite possibly the most anticipated Rolls-Royce of all time, which we have no way of proving because they don't make a time machine and you can't go back and ask. So they can just make a statement like that. The other thing that stood out was they call it the first 3-box car in the SUV sector, which, I mean, we just saw that Mercedes thing that everybody got all offended by. It was a 3-box thing.
But that's just a concept.
Oh, I see.
This is a production vehicle.
All right, I'll give him that.
And but even calling this thing a 3-box vehicle, I mean, you look at this thing in profile, that's kind of a dubious claim. But then again, in the context of everything else that they say about this, I guess it's not that big a deal. I mean, it's got a slight, kind of bustle in the back. But I guess there is actually a bulkhead behind the rear seats, so it makes it, it gives more interior separation. So you don't have the cargo area, as an echo chamber for the rest of the cabin. Yeah. But I mean, the price tag on this thing starts at 240,000 pounds, which is about $335,000, I think, right now. But most likely, most of these will be selling for 400,000 and up, and in many cases, well above that 400,000 level, by the time, people get them configured exactly the way they want. Good for them. But it is the first SUV with suicide doors.
Those are not suicide doors. What are they called?
Coach doors, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. First production SUV with coach doors. All right. Yeah, but so that is actually a useful feature. It gets you good access to the interior.
Again, if you are being driven as opposed to doing the driving, it absolutely is a very useful feature. That your chauffeur can come and open that up. It gives you very easy access to the interior. It's you can get out much more gracefully than you can in something with regular doors.
That some of the people who wind up in these things are going to be graceless people, so they need all the help they can get. So the idea of the coach doors, right, is you open the front door, the umbrella's in there, you pop it out, and then you've got the rear door. I guess your cargo or your passengers are not waiting out in the rain. I don't know. It was explained to me when I drove the Phantom. Yeah. When they explain it, it all makes perfect sense. Here's the thinking behind it. And you're like, oh, okay. I mean, that sounds plausible. I expect that the materials are going to be astoundingly good. The assembly is going to be just top notch as it should be. And so, yeah, I think it's the right product for them at the right time. Tradition is, fine. Complain about tradition. Rolls-Royces have always been huge, heavy trucks anyway. And it kind of doesn't matter. It's like Porsche, right? Get bent out of shape about the new model, or you can just go buy the other one that they still make.
Yeah.
I don't see why it's bad that there's enough demand.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not, I'm not bent out of shape about it. I just think it's,
I'm just glad it's not ugly. I think it's really quite good looking.
That's certainly better than a Bentayga.
Yeah, I despise the Bentayga because it's just hideous. And I mean, I'm sure that they had a lot of requests for this. They wouldn't be building it if they didn't get asked for it. I feel, I guess, it's kind of like Ferrari and again, even Porsche, you continue to ask them enough for the thing, they're going to make it.
And if you offer them a large enough blank check, they'll make one for you anyway.
Like what was it, the Bentley Dominator?
Yeah, there's been all kinds of these bespoke vehicles built over the years for exceedingly rich people.
I would like to be an exceedingly rich person. the cars I would commission, they would be so very interesting.
I'm sure. I can just imagine the custom Crown Victoria you would order.
It would be very flat before it goes to get melted down. I don't know.
Well, speaking of premium brands that are perhaps not quite as successful in some respects as Rolls-Royce has been over the last couple of decades, Cadillac. Cadillac has made some extraordinarily good cars in the last couple of decades, and particularly in this decade. One of my personal favorites is the ATS, and it's going away.
Well,
there's been rumors about this for a while, but it's unfortunately going to bite the dust at the end of the 2018 model.
Well,
run.
I think but you said it. Cadillac has made some extraordinarily great cars, and that I think that's.
But nobody wants cars.
That's part of the problem is they've made cars, and they're just now catching up with the XT5, and they're going to have the XT4. They're getting there, but they kind of missed.
Yeah, the timing was off. They came out with great cars just as everybody was turning away from cars. And I guess what's going to happen is the ATS and there's going to be a replacement for a single replacement for both the ATS and the CTS coming in 2019. And so they're ending production of the ATS this summer, and then they'll be retooling the plant, and then next year they will launch what I believe is going to be the CT5. That's what the rumor I've heard is the CT5 will be the new mid-size sedan that'll kind of take over both the CTS and ATS space, which is unfortunate. Like I said, especially the ATS V, but even the 4-cylinder, the 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo base ATS, is a great car. And they did some fantastic stuff with that. Really fun to drive. And I, for me personally, I find it to be just the right size. If you like, a car, a smaller sedan, like the size of a 3 Series, or a Mercedes C-Class, I think the ATS is great. It looks fantastic and it drives really well.
Yeah. It's all that stuff is still available though. You have to get a Camaro.
That's true. For now at least it's available. But yeah, the Camaro is on the same platform. But at least the CTS or the ATS, when you sit in that one, you can actually see. That's true.
I think
and visibility, there are advantages to having exterior visibility.
There are, for sure. And I mean, the ATS is quite a bit more understated than the Camaro, which it looks really good, but it's possibly more of a statement than everybody wants to make. The other kind of issue I had with the ATS was it really as premium as it needed to be? I heard a lot of complaints about the quality of the interior materials and sort of just how far removed up the food chain it felt from other GM brands. Maybe it wasn't quite as good as a C-Class in that respect, or a 3 Series.
I don't know. I mean, the 3 Series, it's not.
Yeah,
that
the 3
great.
Series can feel cheap inside too.
Yeah, I mean, especially the lower end 3 Series. I think it was as good as the German competitors, but. And like I said, certainly the driving experience was great. Yeah,
well, again, you just Camaro.
Yeah.
Cadillac is still got kind of a little ways to go. They keep shooting themselves in the foot too. Why would you not stick with CTS? They've spent now 15 years trying to establish CTS as a name. Why would you walk away from that and roll out CT5, which looks like CTS anyway? Like, what the hell, guys? Pick one nameplate and stick with it. We've had the 3 Series for how many generations of 3 Series since the E28?
Maybe now that Johan has left the building, maybe they'll reverse course and do that.
I mean,
anyway.
I think this is it's also part of what they've the problem that, and it's not just Cadillac, but most of the domestic brands have continued to do this with when it comes to small cars. You've had the Corolla since what, 1960 something. In that time, there's been. You had what, like...
Well, at Ford, let's see, we've gone through the Pinto, the Escort, the Focus. Seems like there was something else in there, too.
Yeah, that's not too bad, right?
Yeah.
GM did the I guess you could say the Vega, right?
Well, we had GM, you had the Vega, you had the Cavalier, the Cobalt, now the Cruise. There was also the Nova,
right,
which was which was a Corolla. That's still too many. I think the problem there is, most of the older variants of those cars were not that great.
So they get tainted,
and they didn't have a particularly they were tainted brands, and so they decided, okay, we need now we've got something that's much better, so we've got to come up, we've got to give it a new name, to disassociate it from the bad stuff that we built.
But I think
before.
that's wrong. I think that's like, you've established a name, for better or for worse, the name sticks. So then you can, everybody knows your car. So then you can say, yes, we've made it better. Like, come back. Yeah. It's just like, name recognition is so hard to build. It just, and so that's like, okay, fine. Get rid of the ATS, because nobody could make sense of ATS, CTS.
Well, and the other problem too is, with these alphanumeric names, they don't have any real meaning. I mean, you look at, especially if you, for example, you look at Acura, you got the ILX, the TLX, the RLX. What do those mean? Or Lincoln, is definitely, they were the worst offender of this. Everything started with MK. You had, MKC, MKZ, MKT, MKX. They've finally abandoned that, and they're going back to regular names again, for all of their models going forward. But I think part of the reason why manufacturer, at least in the premium segments, went to alphanumeric names is especially as they were trying to compete in China, trying to come up with names that would translate well, or competing in global markets, coming up with names that wouldn't offend anybody.
That's actually really hard.
That's happened. Yeah. I mean, you come, like Buick, for example, with the LaCrosse.
So that's like an apocryphal story. Is that actually, well, you're from Canada. Is that actually a slang term in Canada?
Apparently it is in Quebec. Okay. I didn't grow up in Quebec, so I couldn't say. But they ended up using a different name for the car in Canada. Yeah. But I mean, there have been other cases.
Honda names, the Honda Fit in Sweden.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's why they call it the Jazz there.
Yep.
So. That's actually, it's amusing, but it is difficult. So I guess I get the point to a certain degree about the names, or the alphanumerics. But there's got to be a solution for that. You could just name it something else in that market.
Yeah, that's that. I mean, that's what Honda has done, for example, with the Fit and the Jazz. In Europe, it's called the Jazz, and everywhere else in the world, it's called the Fit. It sounds
so easy from the armchair here. It's comfortable and it's just simple to say, like, just give it different names. Like, what could possibly be? Yeah. So I'm sure there's a reason why they're trying to maybe not do that, but.
Yeah. So let's see what else. Uber. we haven't talked about Uber for a couple of weeks.
Is this basically like a textbook trolley problem thing?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so. I think it's more of just they screwed up big time. what some news came out this week. Uber acknowledged that the car that hit the pedestrian in Tempe, Arizona, about a month or so ago and killed her. From their analysis, they determined that the autonomous driving system, did in fact recognize that there was a human pedestrian crossing the street in front of the car, but so the way these things work, you've got multiple layers in the software. The first layer is the perception system. That's where the sensors detect everything around the vehicle and then try to classify all the objects, as to what they are, whether it's a pedestrian or a vehicle or an animal, or some static object, and then that gets fed into the control system and the path planning system, where it decides, okay, based on what I see in my path and where I need to go, what should I do? Should I stop? Should I accelerate? Should I go around? Should I make a turn? And that's where, according to Uber, the system went wrong. So it actually did classify the woman correctly as a pedestrian, but then it decided that we don't know why yet, whether it thought it was a false positive or what was going on. But for whatever reason, it decided that it did not actually need to slow down or make an evasive maneuver, despite the fact that it had recognized it as a person crossing the street.
That's worse.
I don't know that it's necessarily better or worse. It's just, it starts to narrow down where the problem is in the software. Certainly, I think it's an indication that, their system was not, I don't think, ready to be used on public roads.
Well, yeah.
I think it needed more development, more validation, on test tracks before you put it onto public roads. And, this is one of the fundamental problems with, a lot of the tech companies, Google or Waymo excluded, in that, they'd rather get stuff out there, and, Tesla, I think, falls into this category. They want to put stuff out there, and, do the move fast and break things approach, and iterate quickly and, keep trying to make it better. But, that's fine, when you're just doing, regular software. But, in a case like this where human lives are at risk, we can't afford to do that. We need to verify this stuff before you put it on the road.
Right. So,
and
I think that's why I say it's worse, because not detecting it, I guess it would be bad. But having the system sort of backed off to avoid false positives, like they didn't train it enough in situations where like the stakes were lower. And that, like you talk about doing the simulations, like if you're running virtual training for the AI, it's going to get smarter. Like just this situation, yes, there were a lot of variables and it was complicated for it to figure it out, but it sounds like the real culprit, and I'm glad they're narrowing it down, but it sounds like the real culprit was that it had backed off the reactivity so that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't actually know, how Uber's software was structured in this case, because there's different approaches. What a lot of companies that are doing this stuff are doing is they're using the machine learning approach for the perception system and the object classification. But when it comes to the actual control, the vehicle control and the path planning part of it, they're going back to, and again, this does not apply to everybody, because most companies are not saying exactly what they're doing. But in a lot of cases, companies that I've talked to are, for the control and the path planning, they're using more traditional rules-based approaches, or using a hybrid of the two, using a combination of machine learning and deterministic rules-based approaches. So, when that in the rules-based approach, you would, if you've detected that there's an object in your path, then you're going to do this. It's not relying on an AI or a neural network to make that decision. It's a different kind of software architecture, and we don't know what Uber was doing. So, it's possible that, they were using a machine learning approach. but it's possible that it was a more traditional a classic type of software approach, and they just screwed it up. So it may have been that it wasn't trained properly if it was an AI approach, or it may have been just that a human messed it up, in a more traditional fashion.
Yeah.
Either way,
it's bad. Either way, it's bad, I guess.
Either way, you need to validate it more and really make sure the system is working reliably. But they and clearly they didn't do that.
Are they going to do that now? Like, where do they go from here?
There's another story this evening, or it came out yesterday. Uber's new CEO Derek Khosrowshahi said yesterday that they're going to resume testing of their cars in a few months. So they're still not doing any testing, any public road testing with their systems. So I think right now what they're doing is they're going through and reevaluating their whole development process, and looking at what they've done, and to try to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And hopefully, they're doing a thorough job of it, and hopefully, they will, when they do go back to testing, that they will have put some different processes and procedures in place so this doesn't happen again. But I'm sure that this won't be the last fatal accident that we have with autonomous vehicles. That's something that's never going to go away. I mean, in many cases, many of the accidents involving these vehicles may not even be the fault of these vehicles. Like there was a Waymo vehicle that was involved in an accident last week in Arizona that it was in no way the fault of the autonomous system, because in fact it was a human driver that was approaching from the opposite direction and ran a red light, and then swerved to avoid a vehicle that was crossing an intersection correctly against a green light. The other driver had run a red light, swerved, and lost control, and it jumped a median and ran into the side of one of Uber's vans, autonomous vans that was driving down the street in the opposite direction. And those are the kinds of things that are going to happen, and there's not much that you can do about it.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I guess that it's going to get better, and maybe the more of this stuff that happens, because it's so novel now, we're hearing about every crash. We're hearing about every friggin' Tesla that crashes still, for crying out loud. Like, after a while, those things will, I guess, become more, maybe less frequent and more mundane at the same time, I guess, if that makes sense. Where it's just like, yeah, that's kind of, trains crash. That sometimes gets reported breathlessly, but other times it's just like, it doesn't, Yeah,
I think, the thing that we've got to watch out for going forward is, kind of the frequency of these incidents, based on, how often does it happen versus how many miles we actually drive, or that these vehicles are driving, and right now, it still seems, at least with certain companies, it still seems to be happening at a higher rate than with human drivers. And, we'll see if that gets better. Yeah.
I just hope that they make the machines better instead of making the drivers worse. I think they're doing a good job at the latter.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, certainly I think, a lot of the more advanced driver assist systems that we're seeing today, the level 2 systems, probably are making human drivers worse.
Awesome. Boy, we have a great future to look forward to. What else is on our list?
Let's see. Waymo participated in the big keynote at the Google I/O conference in Mountain View this week, and their CTO showed off a little clip showing how the progress they're making in being able to drive in snow. They started doing some testing in Michigan this past winter, and they're using their machine learning algorithms to be able to filter out the snowflakes, that the sensors are detecting.
Oh, I heard them talking about this. This isn't the first time they've at least mentioned it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the issues with with a lot of these sensors, especially the lidar sensors, is when there's snow or rain, the laser pulses will actually reflect off of the raindrops or snowflakes, and so what you get, the image you get back is, it thinks that there's an object there, and so you end up getting this very noisy signal, and so what they're doing is they're through their the sensor fusion, combining the images from the views from all the different types of sensors. And this is why it's key to have multiple different kinds of sensors that have different capabilities. They're using that, with their machine learning algorithms to say, okay, that dot that I just picked up there with the LiDAR, that's actually a raindrop or a snowflake. And so I'm going to ignore that and, look for the other objects that are, within the field of view. And, they showed something that looked pretty impressive. How effective it actually is in the real world remains to be seen, and how consistent it can do that, is still a big question. But, they're certainly starting to think about this stuff, because if you're ever going to have automated vehicles, working in places like Chicago or New York, or other places, outside of Arizona and California, where we actually have, real weather, you're going to have to figure out these problems. And, up until now, they haven't, but, they seem to be making progress.
It's really hard to drive.
Oh yeah, it's not a trivial problem.
And that, there's so many variables, and it sounds like it shouldn't be that difficult, but when people who drive in snow are when you're experienced at it, there's a lot of stuff you're balancing, and there's just sort of a lot of innate understanding that you have that's going to take them a while to figure that out, to make machines do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's things that humans are actually surprisingly good at, in terms of being able to perceive what's out there. As long as we've got some degree of visibility, through the rain or snow, seeing other vehicles, we're actually pretty good at classifying stuff, and it's actually a really hard problem to do with software and sensors.
Yeah. So there. Take that, machines.
All right. One last one is battery fires. The National Transportation Safety Board started yet another investigation into Tesla.
After another crash. Yet another crash.
After another
yet
crash.
Again made the news.
But this one, yeah, but this one I'm pretty sure had nothing to do with autopilot, because assuming that the police report is accurate, which we can't actually guarantee at this point, it was a 2014 Model S, which would be before they actually had autopilot available. So if it is in fact a 2014 and it didn't have autopilot, then the cause of the crash would seem to be young male driver syndrome, because it was an 18-year-old high school senior driving the Model S based on the reports, was allegedly going through a residential area at a very high rate of speed, lost control, crashed into a wall, and then burst into flames. But the reason why the NTSB is looking at this, and apparently, possibly also going, expanding what they're looking at with the March crash in California, where autopilot was the cause of the crash, is the fact that in both cases the batteries caught fire, after the impact, and they were actually really hard to extinguish. And this is a known problem with lithium-ion batteries, is trying to extinguish the fires.
It's not just lithium ions. Lithium ions are particularly bad with it too. But like batteries, they may seem benign, but they are little package or large packages of potential chemical runaway reactions, or runaway chemical reactions. If you crash and the batteries get broken and the stuff mixes together, you're going to have a fire, and it's going to be hard to put out. And there's there's not a whole lot you can do with that either. You know, you can't really put out a lithium ion battery fire all that effectively, right? I mean, maybe foam.
Yeah, well, but there's actually an even bigger problem in that, depending on what happens to the batteries in the impact or the cells during the impact, is it may appear that you've put the fire out, and then it may spontaneously reignite. And this is apparently what happened, in the March crash. Actually, several days after the crash, when the vehicle was at a wrecking yard or something, it had been removed from the accident scene. The battery reignited. And this is actually, this is not the first time this has happened, and not just with a Tesla. Back in 2011, after GM had originally launched the Chevy Volt, there was an accident in Connecticut with a garage that caught on fire. There was a Volt
I remember that
charging in it. There was no crash, and the original cause of the fire, I believe, was actually due to some bad DIY installation of an EV charger in the garage, and the car was just sitting in the garage, so there was an electrical fire that started to consume the vehicle and consume the garage. But after the vehicle had been taken away, a few days later, it was at the wrecking yard, and the battery started smoldering again. So this is actually a known problem. Trying to make sure that it, not only does the fire get put out, but that it stays out. And so this is what NTSB is taking a look at with this fire yesterday. Apparently, when they thought they had it out, it kept reigniting itself. And, more parts of the battery kept igniting. And so, this is something that we're going to have to resolve with EVs before we get too much further down the line.
One of the solutions that we were talking about earlier, you had mentioned solid state batteries, and they're still kind of in the R&D phase, but it seems like a promising way to at least minimize some of this risk with the chemistry turning into a fire that you can't put out.
Yeah, the problem lies in the electrolyte in the batteries, because it's an organic compound, and oxygen actually gets produced and will feed the fire, and the electrolyte will burn, and it can be self-sustaining. And, one of the advantages to so-called solid state batteries, is that rather than having a liquid electrolyte in the battery, they have a solid state electrolyte, that goes between the positive and negative electrodes in the battery. The problem with these things, is while they're very stable, no one has yet figured out how to produce these things in volume. So they can produce small sample cells that provide very good performance, but nobody's been able to scale it up enough to make a big battery that can actually power a car. Fisker is claiming that their new EV is going to be, launching in 2020 with solid state batteries, but I'll believe that when I see it. And in the meantime, Dyson, their EV project was supposed to use solid state battery technology from an Ann Arbor based startup called Sacti3 that they acquired a couple of years ago. But apparently they have abandoned that work as well. And maybe going with a more conventional battery for now. But so we'll see, if and when, I was at a conference last week and there was quite a bit of discussion of solid state batteries. And nobody's quite sure, when they're going to arrive. There's been reports that Toyota is going to launch solid state batteries around 2022 and some new EVs. But there are others who think that, it's still at least a good 10 years off before we have any mass produced solid state batteries.
Yeah, well, just the whole idea is still confusing to me. Like, you've got to store the electrons in silicon. Like, essentially, like that's what it says to me. Even though that's not really what it is. Like, that's what I think. Like, you're storing electrons in silicon as the electrolyte, and that's not exactly it. But that seems really difficult to solve.
Yeah, Yeah, it is a challenging problem. Most of the solid state electrolytes are not as conductive as the liquid or polymer electrolytes that we use today, and so that makes it more challenging to get higher power batteries that way. So we'll see what happens, but it's not going to be trivial to solve this problem of battery reignition.
I have a solution. It's no less dangerous. Plutonium. That's
what could go wrong with that? Yeah. All right. I think that's enough. I think
we've done a good podcast. We didn't publicize this episode, so we don't have any questions, do we? We don't have any feedback or anything?
Not that I'm aware of, and we've already been going an hour and a half, so I think that's enough for this week.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. We will catch everybody next week. Feel free to drop us a line, and we'll catch you again next time.
See ya.